Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter and today I'm painting Lord Thorne of the Wold from the Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim movie. A fantastic character, lots of details, lots of color. I really loved painting him. I'm going to show you how I did it. First I primed the model black and I left it in pieces. So I left the base separate from the body, as you can see here. And not only that, I also did not attach the head right at first, because he's very difficult to paint behind the cloak, the collar of the cloak. So what I did here is I took the head and I attached it to a push pin. Maybe if something else, anything will do. For me, this was quite an easy way. I usually have something like this lying around, and it's quite easy to hold. So a great way of painting. So that was the preparation, and we're starting with the face. A base tone of Bugman's Glow. Make sure that your paint is nicely thinned down, not too thin, it's going to be watery, but you do not want to lose any of the nice details that are in these models. So thin down that paint. Don't forget the neck. And that's it for our base color. Next off, we're going to add some Cadian flesh tone. And with this Cadian flesh tone, we're focusing on all the raised areas of your model. What you can do is block out the color with a first layer, then thin down your paint and apply it as a kind of a wash to blend it all together. So that way you get some sharp details and the colors don't differentiate too much, because the step from Bugman's Glow to Cadian flesh tone can be rather big. So this way the transition is more fluid. And the same thing we're going to do with Kislev flesh. Again, just focus on tinier details, so the eyebrows, maybe some wrinkles on the forehead, cheekbones, top of the nose, stuff like that. And if you want, you can again blend parts of those colors together by making it a wash. For the eyes, I'm holding my brush horizontal. I'm making horizontal movements like this. You make sure you have a very fine tip, otherwise you're going to ruin your flesh tones. Add a little pupil with Abaddon black. Make him a mean, menacing face. Then with some Corvus black, I painted the collar on this head piece. I cleaned up all the parts that the flesh tones touched the collar, so make it look nice and clean. And then I'm going to be highlighting the color with a mixture of Corvus black and Altheian gray. Just focus on the very edges to make those edges pop out just a little bit more. And you can take it even further by adding some pure Altheian gray to the very top of the model and get a nice sharp edge, for example. Then the hair. I give it a base coat of storm vermin fur. I'm going for a bit of a dirty white hair look. And the storm vermin fur has a slight tone of brown in it, which makes it look like a dirty gray already. And from here on, we're going to brighten it up. The first step is that I'm mixing storm vermin fur with pallet witch flesh, and I'm holding my brush sideways against the hairs, so you just touch the top hairs and not the bottom, the inwards part. We're going to wash it later on, as I did with the face. So first off, a second layer highlight of pure pallet witch flesh. Just the very front tips of the hair. Hold your brush vertically this time and create some extra hairlines in the mustache and the beard to create a very beautiful extra set of details. And the same on the side of the hair. I now made a wash of the paint, and as you can see here, I thinned it down quite a lot, and I'm applying it as a wash so that your highlighted details will still remain visible, but the overall color of the hair grows brighter and brighter. Next we're going to continue on the base with a mixture of Rhinox hide darkened down by some Abaddon black as a base tone for the horse head, the wooden horse head. And we're going to make it look like it's been burned down. It's a very tiny detail which will probably not be very visible in the end result, but I like those tiny details. I'm washing it with some Nuln Oil, and we're then going to be highlighting it with some dried bark. First, the rocky, stony, sandy bottom of it, and we're going to apply some dried bark to the horse head as well. Now remember, these are pieces of wood formed into a wooden horse face, so it needs to look like it's got a wooden structure. So I'm using very fine lines overall, and I'm then mixing the dried bark with some Baneblade Brown for a first highlight on the wooden horse. I wanted to stand out from the base color of the sand, so I did another highlight of pure Baneblade Brown. And if you want, you can take it further than that. Next, I applied some Abaddon Black on the bottom of the piece as if it were charcoals burned. I added some specks on the floor as well because when it's burning, well, the rest burns with it, right? So I made some scorch marks here and there. And then with some Evil Sun's Scarlet, I made it as though this was still glowing. So apply some details. The higher up you go, the smaller you make them. And the bottom is really smoldering. Then with some Fire Dragon Bright, I added some extra details, a brighter color, and painted it in the middle of the red parts, so it's still glowing. Focus on the middle of the red parts and the bottom, because that would be the part where it's burning. And as a final detail, I mixed some Iril Yellow. I used some Iril Yellow to give it the brightest possible look, and it looks very nice, I think. It's really glowing. Next, some Karak Stone as a dry brush on the sand of the base. And an extreme highlight of Palette Witch Flesh to the very tops of that sand to make it pop out just a little bit more. There's some rocks lying around. I used some Mechanica Standard Grey as a base tone. Just picked out a couple of rocks. If you have very fine modeling sand, you'll probably not have many. Here you can choose whether or not to pick up some of them as a rock, or others would be a bigger clump of sand. Now I'm highlighting it with some Grey Sear to add some sharpness to the rocks, give it a nice outline. You can wash it with Nuln Oil if you want. And now we're continuing on the body, Night Lord's Blue. And Night Lord's Blue I used for all the inner parts of the armor pieces, the knees, the wrists, the thing hanging around his neck, to give it a nice blue shine. I'm brightening it up by applying Thousand Suns Blue in a kind of a wash version. So you have to go over it a couple of times because you want the outsides of those pieces to be nice and dark and the inside to brighten up. So go easy on it and give it 2 or 3 tries. Then some Mechanica Standard Grey and Abaddon Black as a dark grey mixture for the sleeves of his shirt. There's just a tiny part showing. And I also did it on the rims of the cloth. Then we're going for some white, and by doing so, first did a Dawnstone Grey layer. Pure white is often does not come out very nice, so what you do is you build it up from grey to white. So the front of his cloth is white looking, and for that the second layer I'm using is Grey Sear, which is very close to white. And because white also has some shadows in it, you want to build it up, but white is never pure white. So you can use it as a highlight, as I did here with some white scar. So you can create some sharpness to the white areas, the folds, etc. The details on his wrist armor, the horse heads showing there. And next, some dryad bark with Abaddon black for the boots. And to highlight that, I'm using some pure dried bark. Focused on the raised areas, the top of the shoes, some folds in it, make them nice and sharp. And I also applied the same colors to the shoulder belts. Next, dried bark on a Shapti bone as a highlight to the belt. So there's belts around his waist and there are belts around his arms. Then for the gold parts, I'm using Retributor armor. It's a nice and dark gold look, and there's lots of gold details on this model, so take your time and pick them out very carefully. There's the chest piece, there's the thing hanging around his neck. Make sure to hold your brush sideways so the inner blue part doesn't go to waste. And same goes for the leg and wrist parts. Hold your brush sideways and make sure that your paint is not too thin but not too thick, and will go on very, very nicely. Now these gold details is what makes this model look so rich. There's a lot of color in them, and make sure to do it the right way. I also applied it to the sword, the hilt of the sword, and the blade itself I did with some lead belcher. Now there's a tiny buckle here on his belt, and I did that with some lead belcher as well. Now to highlight the gold, I'm using Canoptek alloy. Canoptek alloy is a really complementary color to the gold and makes it look nice and shiny without losing the glow of the gold. It gives it a sharp finesse, I guess. So I just applied it to the very top of all the gold parts, the parts that would catch the most light. So give it a good thought before putting it everywhere. Now what I forgot to do before was adding a detail inside of the sword. So I did palette witch flesh, and I then gave it a contrast paint wash with any kind of red you have to make it nice and shiny. I then took some pure ashen gray and I highlighted all the gray parts of the model. So the rims of the cloth, every kind of fold in there. And next I highlighted those gray parts with some dawnstone. Also on the sleeves, make it a little bit more interesting. Now the big part of the model is the cloak. So Galvrobak red mixed with some Abaddon black makes a very nice dark purplish red color as a base color for the cloak. Now that's a large area, and be very careful when painting the inside not to touch the rest of the model. I then used corn red in a pure form to apply a highlight, and here it might seem very bright, but the nice thing about corn red is that it dries up quite dark. So the end result will be very fluent. It will look very natural. So focus on all the raised areas of the cloak, at least some nice dark parts in the middle. It's kind of a natural shade. I left the inside of the cloak all dark, just for the very edges and the parts you can see, and the rest I did not touch again. Now to highlight the red, I'm using Wasdaka red. And you can here see that the red is very nicely blended together. And the Wasdaka red will add an extra bright part to the reds. So focus on smaller areas while doing so. So I used mainly on the shoulders and the front part of the cloak that would catch most of the light. And I left the backside mostly very dark. And I'm gonna take it a little bit further by adding Fire Dragon Bright to the Wasdaka red to give it a nice orangey glow just to the very, very, very top of the model, because this is a fine detail, you don't want to overdo it. Now to blend those colors together a little bit, I added some pure Fire Dragon Bright with a dry brush. And that way all the reds come together very nicely and it gives a nice finish to the model, I think. I'm now applying some null oil to the metal parts and I'm sharpening the sword afterwards with some Stormhost silver. Final few details. Some dried bark I used as a base color for the straps around his wrist pieces. And I then highlighted that with some Gorthor brown. Now all that's left to do is glue all the parts together, and here is our final result, Lord Thorne of the Wold. He looks amazing. I really love the end result of my model. I hope it was of any help to you guys. I'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below if you can. And consider subscribing to the channel to get more of these videos. I'd love to hear from you in the future, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!